write down the process, write down what you're doing, even if it's experiments, even if it's, rough draft, whatever, put it down on paper, and then you can actually test it, evaluate it, and optimize it from there.
Hello and welcome to Analysis Paralysis. Today I'm speaking with Chirag Gupta, who runs a co-working space called NoD Coworking. He started this because he had a passion to help others and build an area where people could come together and leverage each other's resources and networks to grow their businesses. I really enjoyed speaking to Chirag about all of this because I and many people that I've talked to in the back of their head have always had kind of an idea of starting an accelerator, an incubator, just some way to help startups and maybe take some percentage of the company. Co-working is a little bit different from that, but you can still help the companies that are going there. So we talked about a lot around how we got started, how we got involved with this. We've seen a few of these pop up actually locally here in Buffalo. And I've always been curious what the business model looks like and how difficult it is to actually, pay for the rent and keep a place running and make money from it. Enjoy the episode. So I kind of want to jump into maybe understanding your background with how you got started in the co-working space and maybe what goal you have in general with it, or what type of area you want to get more involved with, if that's getting more involved with automated or just business process in general or consulting. So you started the co-working space. Was the goal for that to eventually turn it into some type of incubator, accelerator, or what was the thing that really drew you to wanting a co-working space?
So when I was in Chicago, I was working from other co-working spaces when I first started kind of doing independent consulting and things like that. And even just going to meetups and networking events happened to be at places like 1871 or other kind of incubators and things like that. And so I remember that some of the startups I was working on totally failed. And at the same time, I was loving being in that co-working space environment, despite how the startup was going.
Sure.
So I remember telling myself even back then, I was like, one day when when I'm semi-retired and I have enough money to do whatever I want to open up one of these places and build a community like this, especially in Dallas where I'm from, and bring that vibe and that culture to a city which I really felt could use some of that.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting the opportunity to do it sooner in life. Not saying I retired when I was 25 or anything, but I had enough at that time to sort of take some risk on it. And I started with a small, probably about 3,000 square feet is what I think we started with in 2014. And now that has grown to about 18,000 square feet. Basically expanded within the same building that we started in, and it's been a great journey. Shout out to my team at the co-working space. Storm and Matt are holding down the fort right now.
Yeah. So what does it look like? I guess so. I've had the idea. I think a lot of people, once you start getting involved with startups and doing your own thing, you want some involvement with something along the lines of an incubator, accelerator, and obviously something like this kind of overlaps it all, because typically startups are developed in co-working spaces, and sometimes naturally they start supporting the people inside of the co-working space, and all of a sudden now you're kind of an accelerator to some extent. So sure. I've definitely thought about it as well. A few of my friends have as well. It's like something that they want to be involved with. What does it take to actually kind of get one going? And what does your support, like what involvement do you have, and what does your day-to-day look like being involved with that?
Sure. Yeah, man. Co-working life is awesome. It's crazy as well. I'd say the life of a co-working space operator like myself is it involves a lot of meeting with people, talking to people, because you're kind of building a community while at the same time you're managing operations for a physical space. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's it's a combination of, you got to basically hustle 24/7 at the beginning to get that fire started. And I remember early days when I was like, man, I just got to make some calls. I got to get whoever I can get, friends of friends, whoever, to just like come in and hang out at this place. And had to, it was like pulling teeth at the beginning. Honestly, it wasn't like we just put up our flag and people started showing up. It took, it took a lot of calls, emails, growth hacking, as it were, to just kind of start getting people there. And then once we had a core community of paying members, that's when I feel like I also started to build a little more um, confidence personally that I knew what I was doing. And but yeah, like some of the first startups that joined our space, I really like, the credit goes to them because they totally took a chance on joining a space that was new. And we had shitty Wi-Fi at the beginning, and
Oh, geez.
it was a small community. We had, it wasn't like we could say the same sort of promises that we can make today, which are like, join this space and you'll, immediately make valuable connections for your business. You'll find mentors, you'll find talent, you'll get connected with investors if you're looking for that. And today we can offer all that because we're 5 years into it and we have about 30 startups there at any given point. But back at the beginning, yeah, it was, I felt like I was doing, I was like almost like fake it till you make it kind of vibe. And I was just trying to sell smoke and mirrors, I felt like, at the beginning.
Sure.
To get people there. And the interesting thing I found was, like, in Dallas, there were actually a few people that were passionate about co-working, and they were kind of waiting for such a place to exist. And they ended up becoming our like early adopters and people who to this day still advocate for us in the community, tell their friends about us, and they're just proponents of the co-working culture. But I'd say 80% of our members in Dallas are probably people that were first exposed to co-working or that culture by coming to our place. And so we've had to do a lot of education in that process, and just almost coach people on like how to operate from a place that has no walls and no cubicles, and is an open community. So that's, and I guess like about the day to day of it. Yeah, like I said, at the beginning for like the first couple of years, I was running the whole place solo. So I'm getting up at 7 a.m., opening the doors, starting the coffee, and then I've got people coming in for tours starting at 9 a.m. And whenever I get breaks, I'm on my computer responding to emails, scheduling the next tour, negotiating with vendors to get better internet, better coffee, better desks, all that stuff. So that's I'd run like meetups and happy hours in the evening. So I'd be like some days 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. just like wiped out, and then do it again the next day.
Just using the space to like full capacity whenever possible. Totally. I mean, it makes sense, right? So you have this large overhead, and it's just like, how can we get it filled, to either lead to new future customers, people staying there, or just, have events and get paid in some way, or not even get paid, just for some type of marketing in some regard. If you have people going there like, oh, there's a cool space, maybe I should actually work out of here. So I'm curious, because you had reached out and mentioned on Slack that you were looking for like a CRM for one of your teams. Is this, I guess, a team inside of the co-working space, or what is your relationship with a lot of these companies now? Are you actually helping them find software and help them with their business processes, or are you just like kind of in general just around there and happy to answer questions?
Yeah, I guess it started out as the latter and evolved into the former. Basically, what I mean is, as soon as we got past like the 2-year point and I was able to start hiring staff and got a little bit of my schedule under control, then I was able to be available for people at the co-working space and founders who just had questions, or they might be looking for a recommendation for a local IP law firm, or fundraising advisor, product management person. And I was starting to become like a resource for people because I was just there, and people were like, okay, um, Chirag knows a lot of people in the Dallas startup community, so maybe he can help us find a resource we're looking for.
Mm.
Totally informal and wasn't charging for that advice. It was just I felt part of my role being the owner of the co-working space, and then that kind of evolved into kind of formalizing that into a sort of consulting services model. And a few of the startups now I've taken advisory board seats with, or small pieces of equity in their company to essentially go out and help them in a more structured way.
Oh, cool.
And these days, I'm mostly specializing in sales operations consulting for startups. So that's where the CRM
Mm.
questions came
Okay.
about. And I'm just always looking to find tools that are going to help a startup get from pre-revenue to their first customer, or go from a 3-person team to a 10-person team. So it's an interesting. It's kind of that growing pains phase of a startup. That's where I like to get involved and help coach founders through that, and
Yeah.
connect them with resources.
So that's one of the interesting things that I've learned as well for a lot in my business is kind of figuring out when working with either a small business or a startup, and like what you mentioned, pre-revenue, the needs of a pre-revenue business is different from the needs of maybe a small business that already has 1, 2, 3 million a year in revenue. And sometimes you just need a system in place for a startup just to see if their product, their idea can gain traction. You don't necessarily need to have this rock solid foundation on all the best software. So that's something that I actually struggled with quite a bit when I started working with startups. It was just like they never had money to spend on, I guess, the right solution and the right type of integration automation. But at the end of the day, it's like it makes sense. They don't have money. They just need something that can kind of get them from point A to point B. So do you ever struggle with maybe having the solution fit in mind because you've worked with maybe more successful startups or things that have worked internally for you and they just don't have the resources or the money to, I guess, afford your services or afford the type of software that's needed in your mind for them?
Can you say the last part again? I don't know if I fully got the question.
Yeah, just essentially, do you ever run into scenarios at which you're making suggestions to the startups and they either can't afford the services that they really truly need? And then how do you deal with that type of scenario where it's like, we don't have money, we don't have any venture funding right now. How do you expect us to get ABC software and, these consulting services and things like that?
Oh, well, that's the fun part. Okay, now I get what you're asking. That's where I feel like you got to get creative with it,
Hmm.
and use different. You got to sometimes invent whole new models and new ways of doing things in order to overcome those budget barriers, or
Hmm.
whatever is the next barrier to growth. And I feel like I was kind of going to say this earlier too, but like I don't have an MBA or or a degree in that type of stuff, but I feel like operating this co-working space for 5 years has effectively been like going to business school,
Oh, yeah.
specifically for, I don't know, like focusing on startups and early stage tech companies.
Hmm.
And so I feel like just through trial and error, and there's been a lot of startups at our co-working space, probably about 120 now that have come through our space, and probably about 80 of those have totally crashed and burned.
Sure.
And those are ones that I might have been trying to help out, or advising, and you just learn all those lessons of what doesn't work. And I
Hmm.
think that's what has made me pretty effective at making the right connections when I'm working with my clients today, is just having had that many sort of failures under my belt. And I think that when startups are sort of asking for resources, a lot of times I have to take a step back with them and be like, hey, it's not about picking. I think we were talking about streak versus copper, and a lot of times startups are like, oh, they see other startups using that, and they're like, okay, let's see which one we can get a better discount on. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's cool, but maybe let's take even a step back and consider that we're pre-revenue. We haven't validated the sales process yet. We don't even know if we're going to be needing to make calls and take meetings to drive these sales, or if we can do it all in an e-commerce way with Facebook ads.
Mhm.
And so I think that's what I'm able to do effectively now is coach a startup through validating their assumptions and then going about picking a tool that's going to support that. Once they've figured out, like, okay, this is a great repeatable process that we can use to generate sales. Uh, and you might find that it's just a simple spreadsheet that the two co-founders share at the beginning, and you don't need a paid SaaS tool yet. And it's more about customizing the solution for the startup rather than tailoring the startup itself towards the solution, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, essentially figuring out initially what their business process is for sales, I think is such a major thing that working with family businesses, small businesses, medium businesses, at that point, they already have a sales process. Maybe it's not the most efficient sales process, but at least you can speak to someone and say, what does your sales process look like? What does qualifying a customer look like? Is that a phone call or is that a meeting or what does that consist of? And then you can start building that documentation around there to then figure out how to, maybe better organize their sales process and pull in the systems and everything. Whereas a startup, it's like, we haven't even sold someone yet, or we've sold two people, but those were like referrals. Those were like given to us on a platter because that was not a proper sales process. So it sounds like a lot of what you're doing is the consultative aspect of really vetting them to figure out, like, we need to figure out what our sales process is. What do we think it is? Let's test it, and then when when that works, then we'll say, okay, this is a good first step for our sales process. The sales process is going to change a lot. It's going to change probably more now than later, but we need to get something on paper, test it out, so we can start putting some systems into place. So it
You
sounds a
said it,
lot
man.
like, yeah.
I was going to say, if there's one takeaway from this episode for people out there struggling with this, it's like write down the process, because
Mhm.
until you have it documented, I feel there's no good way to measure it and evaluate it. I try to coach all my clients on this. It's like write down what you're doing, even if it's experiments, even if it's just rough draft, whatever. Put it down on paper, and then you can actually test it, evaluate it, and sort of optimize it from there.
What's so funny too is like what you were mentioning prior about not going to school and getting an MBA and things like that. And realistically, the stuff in school that they kind of force you to learn or push into you is like, okay, before you start anything, you need to create a business plan and you go through all this stuff that's so like high level. And it's like, actually, when you're in a startup, if you're fundraising money and you're really diving into that path and going for VCs, sure, you need some type of rough idea of a plan, but they force you to build like a very, very structured business plan of like, what is the facility you're going to buy? What is the cost of the monthly of that facility? How are you going to be spending all of your money in advertising and all these things? And it's like, you don't even really know until you start playing with it. You don't even know who your target customer is. You're just guessing. And really, you just need to dive into it so much that I believe so much that the, quote unquote MBA that you've gotten from being in it is so much more valuable than getting it from school. Like school, they teach you the hypotheticals of it. I'm similar in the fact that like everything I learned has been from my businesses and being involved in that and being surrounded with actual business needs of small, medium businesses and startups. That's where you really learn, what I guess where you can supply value and where you can make money. You don't learn that in school at all.
Totally agree. And it's like no offense to the MBAs who are out there.
Sure.
Like there's other value adds you get from going through
Oh yeah,
programs like that.
definitely.
But I think, yeah, man, that totally lines up with my experience thus far.
Well, so even just I guess like the connecting, the interesting thing that I've heard too from those that have gone to school to get their MBA, a lot of it comes down to like, well, I've connected with Jim and Bob and Danny, and they're going to be working for this company, and they like you start getting these relationships and connections opening up. But to bring us back to the conversation we had right at the beginning, like that's really what the internet has done. The amount of relationships and communities and networking that we've been able to build just because the internet is a thing and we're able to reach out and find these little communities, I think is just as valuable, if not more, because you're surrounding yourself not just this location-based area, which is school, but instead you're actually open up to the world, like having, friends in different countries that you could communicate with and figure out, like, sometimes they're ahead where you're at, or I could speak to someone that's, for example, in LA and I'm in Buffalo, New York. So what place is probably further ahead in the ecosystem of startups? So I can learn from there and then pull it to the Buffalo ecosystem if I want, or have clients all across the US, just because you can network everywhere. So I think we're just in a different world, and a lot of what school teaches you is maybe the way that business used to be, whereas things have just changed and changes so quickly. And even tomorrow, things are going to be different than today. Like things get outdated so quickly as well.
Totally. Yeah, I feel like on that note, I kind of feel like there's huge, yeah, like the barrier to entry for startups is practically gone at this point. There's so much access to information and different sort of niche communities and networks that it's the resources are out there to find a community, niche community, solve a problem for them, and start making sales. Now I feel that all it really requires is that the founder has some discipline and is honest with himself or herself that, dude, if you ever feel like you're doing busy work for your startup, just like stop and check yourself, because it's probably not the most efficient use of time. And that's, I feel like that's the whole game. Like sometimes I might be like inside of getting stuck in a rabbit hole of Facebook or Twitter, and I might tell myself I'm going into Twitter to spend half an hour looking for leads based on a new hashtag that I'm searching for, and then I might get distracted with some of the content and find myself like, I don't know, watching videos on there or just finding other things personally interesting and just getting lost in it. So it's like you gotta pause right there and be like, okay, what was the measured result I was looking to get in this half hour, and let me make sure I'm getting that, and then moving to the next thing. So I think that's one thing I like about. I was just kind of reading your website here too, just about what's the most efficient way to do things as well. And that comes down to documenting processes, but also just being personally disciplined about how we're spending our time.
Absolutely. And sometimes you need to have that, quote unquote, like reward behind a wall. And that wall is, I need to get this, and this done before you reward yourself, whether that's TV or maybe just a different piece of the business that you enjoy more. Because I think that's something that you experience too when you're kind of the only person early on in a business. There's a lot of stuff that you don't enjoy doing. For example, I hate doing proposals and like massive scope of work contracts and things like that. I would much rather be on a call and talking to someone for 2 hours, understanding their processes and documenting over that sales aspect and really trying to create things out. But at the end of the day, you need to create the proposal and send it off to someone in order for them to buy from you. So you won't even have that other type of work unless you do that. So you need to kind of discipline yourself in that sense too, where it's like, I enjoy doing this piece of the business more than this, but I need to do this to be able to do the enjoyable piece. And eventually I'll hire out, the piece that I don't like. And you'll never get there until you get the business. So you really need to focus, and really, I think discipline is a massive, massive aspect to anything in life, really. Something that I'm curious about with you and teams that you've worked with, or people that have maybe come up to you and be like, hey, I have an idea for a startup. I'm currently at a stable job and just, I don't know if I should make the leap or whatever. What would you maybe tell someone that feels like that they're stagnant, right? Like they've saved up a little bit of money, but they're very risk adverse, and they've always been in like a stable, company, yet they kind of want to make this leap. And what would you maybe tell them that should they make the leap? Or maybe what do you tell them that they need to have planned out in order to make the leap? Or, is it based on age too, responsibilities? What kind of goes through your mind when someone asks you that type of question?
Sure. I'd say, yeah, I get this question pretty often, and you're totally right. I'm in this conversation just about with every other person that I meet. Sometimes I like to take credit too for pushing people over that edge and being the one to convince them to take the leap. But yeah, on a more like practical note, I think if someone's in that position, at a stable job, I usually coach them to find find out how, what it's going to take for them to survive for 6 months, and whatever, just kind of like bare bones living expenses they need to meet, and things like that, and give yourself like a 6 month window to go for it full time, and join a co-working space while you're at it if you want to be around a community of people who can support you in that journey. But I think 6 months is about the sweet spot for a few things. It'll be enough time to validate if there's a market for your thing. It'll be enough time to raise a seed round. It'll be enough time to find a co-founder and build some semblance of the core founding team and build an MVP. So I think, and partly I've done a lot of these startup weekend events and hackathons, participated in some of them I've run and hosted myself, and I think that's where I've just seen tons and tons of startups go through the motions of use the business model canvas or the lean startup method or whatever it is to build their MVP and the first version of their pitch deck and so forth.
Mm.
And so I think, and I also think like 6 months, I don't know, it's kind of a good way to validate any sort of lifestyle change. And doing a startup is a lifestyle change. I think people should be prepared for that.
Yeah.
I was kind of reminded also of the time that I was like, I'm going to become a vegetarian, and I decided to do it for 6 months, and then I did it for 6 months and found that it wasn't going strictly vegetarian wasn't for me, but it gave me a good amount of time for my body to adjust to it, to learn about the new types of ways I need to be cooking, new types of ways I need to be shopping, getting used to picking different items on the menu that I'm eating out, and it really did come along with a different lifestyle. I found myself hanging out with my vegetarian friends more.
Sure.
And I was getting, little things like that,
Yeah.
start to add up to a overall lifestyle change. And I think when someone makes the switch to a startup, a lot of times they're not prepared for, they might be prepared for what's going to happen with their 9 to 5, but they might not expect what's going to happen from 5 p.m. to midnight. And what's going to happen to their social life, and what's going to happen to their family life, and so on. And I think those are the real things of life that are important to consider before making a switch.
Which I think too, a lot of people, that's the appealing aspect of it. Like being able to, on a Wednesday, for example, go and visit a buddy in a different state and it not be that big of a deal because, hey, I could work remotely today. And a lot of companies now with stability, they don't really offer that level of freedom where if you feel like you should be able to go and work remotely that day, or say you don't have a massive workload, just take the day off. Realistically, if there's not stuff that needs to be done, maybe you work your ass off the day before, the day after, or the week later. I mean, my business is so many ebbs and flows. Sometimes I'm super busy for a week, and then the next week it's very relaxed, and I only have like 10 hours of actual business work that I need to get done. So I think being able to manage and monitor that type of allocation. Whereas when you're at work, the truth of the matter is when you're working for a larger company, you're going to have a lot of time which you're kind of sitting around doing absolutely nothing. The nice thing about being kind of self-employed and having your own thing, when you have literally nothing going on, you can actually do nothing or do what you want to do, or say that you want to go and play golf or something, you can go and do that, whereas you can't just up and leave and do that at a general type of work. But like you mentioned, it's a totally different type of lifestyle that like I probably wouldn't be able to mesh with going to a normal company now, but I feel like I'm very efficient in what I do. Some days I'm not efficient, but I don't need to be efficient, and that's okay. But that's like a learned thing, right?
Totally. And dude, even right now, it's like for me, it's 10 a.m. on the West Coast on a Thursday, and
Sure.
and I'm able to take some time with you to be on this podcast, and it's not. I didn't have to ask my boss for permission.
Yeah. No, it's a great feeling.
I think the other thing I like about it is just like I use this metaphor of I guess like playing cards, and I feel like when I'm in this life that I've created, I'm able to use every card that's in my hand. Meaning, if I was at corporate job, they might be asking me to use one or two cards out of my hand, and the other three skills or sort of passions that I have would just kind of go untapped. Uh, but I feel like since I have the flexibility, like I said, with just how I can manage my time, like today, for example, I'm in the recording studio with this buddy of mine in San Francisco, and we were in a band together in college called the Aurelia Trio, and we just, we're just messing around, made some music this morning, and caught up in San Francisco.
Yeah,
No big deal. And
that's
I
awesome.
have this podcast, and I've got a client call later in the day, and it's able to flow nicely, and I'm able to use all the cards in my hand, whether it's music or I'm also working on an international peace project now um, called Love Thy Neighbor, and it's like I have a team of 25 people all around the world that are working on that. So
Oh, wow.
I'm able to kind of make the impact I want to have in the world, and not be waiting for my next like vacation day allocation to do the things I really want to do.
Oh, yeah.
Able to kind of
You could do it side by side, right? Because you have the time. I think everyone has the time. Like realistically, 40 hours in a week. You really have more than 40 hours a week from the actual job aspect. And I think the tough thing, though, is when you're doing your own thing, it's always on your mind, though. So, like, even if you say, I'm only going to spend 30, 40, 50 hours a week on my startup idea, it's so much more because when you're in the shower, you're thinking about it. When before going to bed, you're thinking about it. If you have something going on with the client, you stress about it, eats away at you. Like, the level of stress that exists is probably higher than any corporate job that you can get. So it definitely has, drawbacks and downsides, but allowing you the freedom to be able to do some of the things that you're talking about. I think it outweighs it. I feel like it outweighs it. Maybe my gut and my stomach and my, anxiety doesn't like it so much, but I feel like at the end of the day, it's worth it. So you mentioned this piece. I'm a little bit curious as well with it. Is this like a nonprofit that you're starting, or kind of a movement? Like what is the thing that you're working toward with that?
Yeah, sure. It's called Love Thy Neighbor. We are getting school kids in pairs of neighboring countries to exchange handwritten letters.
Oh, cool.
That's the game. And so I started this project in India and Pakistan to kind of help with the peace movement in that region of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And as other people kind of heard about what we were doing, they were like, oh, maybe we could use this in other pairs of neighboring countries around the world that have had maybe a violent past or just political turbulence.
Yeah.
So I've got teams now working on this in Europe, some in Africa, a little bit in Central America, the Middle East as well. So it's been a phenomenal thing to see that project grow, and to have a team behind that now is super awesome. There's no, I feel like it's the first thing I've done in a while that has no profit motive.
Yeah, right.
We're not fundraising. We just literally are advocating for this cause in different countries and talking to schools, talking to teachers, encouraging them to bring this letter writing activity to their English classrooms. Mm-hmm. And so, that's the project.
And realistically, like everything that you're saying with that, I've had a few conversations with some friends lately, specifically just around like what kind of happiness is for, what actually makes you happy, and is what is like the destination of happiness, what that is, or is it more of the shifting thing? Do you ever like hit this moment of like, I'm happy, I'm in bliss, and I've made it, I'm done? And realistically, I think once you kind of have the freedom to do this type of stuff, you see like in the moment, I really feel like I want to help people. And this is my way of being happy in the moment. And, hopefully this thing grows, but maybe it'll shift too. Something totally different will come from it. And I think part of having that freedom versus maybe being in more of a structured job is you get to have that little inkling toward what will make you happy, and you get to run with it a little bit, and you're able to do it, and you're able to put the time toward it to see, is this something that actually, itches that or scratches that itch that I kind of have? And will this actually make my life better or not? Even things that you're mentioning, like trying out going vegetarian, like trying that stuff out to see if it makes you happier. And at least you gave it a try to realize, Because at least now you can say no. Like, it's not the thing that will change my life, that will make me in this better state of being. At least you kind of give it a try and you have the discipline to do it. I think a lot of that comes to with like working out, for example. It's maybe easy to do that for a few weeks, but to really see if it makes a life difference for you, you probably need to do it for that 6 months, build that habit out of it, and really kind of structure things around it and see, it's not easy, and it's not, to do all of this stuff in general, it's not easy to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, man. For me, that the International Peace Project was a challenge for me and something that I was kind of looking inward and saying, why not try to take something on a global scale
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of expand myself and grow to be able to see what that's like and execute on that level.
Mm-hmm.
So it started out like that. And I was kind of just like, in a way, I don't want to say bored, but kind of got tired of just working on startup after startup, in sort of these small niche markets. And I was just like, I want to do something at a national scale or at a global scale, and push myself to learn new tools, um, build new skills, and go after that. And this project has been um, already showing me so much about what I don't know, and giving me the opportunity to pick up a lot of new skills and to learn about, like, I'm now learning about international shipping, managing, teams of people in other countries around the world, and uh, I've got a team of like language experts and translators in the middle of it as well. And so it's a whole new type of um, challenge. And so I love that aspect, just feeling the personal growth from
Sure.
figuring all these things out. But it's, yeah, like you said, it's kind of like that happiness fuel for me at the end of the day. I sort of wake up knowing that, whatever happened yesterday, like in all of my other startups and all my other projects, as long as that peace project took one small step forward, I'm always like in a really satisfied mindset at the end of the day, knowing that I'm making some small difference with that effort.
Do you think that you're vetting yourself in some way to, in the future, do some type of nonprofit? Or because I know a lot of companies too, like you look at Tom's Shoes, for example, like they will donate a pair of shoes for every shoe bought. That this, like doing something like this, will better allow you to have those connections, to allow you to maybe have I forgot exactly what they call it, but a for-profit business that kind of has nonprofit aspect to it, or just all out going for a nonprofit. Like, is that something that you're interested at all in doing, or really it's just kind of totally unrelated to it?
I'd say it's totally unrelated, but I guess I also do consider myself to be I don't know, philanthropist slash entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
a Phil entrepreneur, Philip philanthropreneur, if you will.
Yeah.
I don't know. But yeah, I think that's kind of giving me a good idea now that I think about it. I'm like, well, if that project does grow and we're able to, maybe tap into some of the for-profit ventures that I have going and allocate a percentage of those profits towards supporting this nonprofit effort, that might be a logical way to go about it, to sort of sponsor, um, world peace a little bit through the profit-making ventures that I have going.
And and it's in a meaningful way. Like, how that money is being spent. The efficiency of it.
Yeah.
Whereas, like right now, if you just donate money to a random nonprofit, I mean, you hear so many different stories of so many different things. Of only 20% of what you donate actually goes toward the cause, and just various things like that. Whereas at the end of the day, from everyone that I've kind of talked to, a lot of people kind of lead toward, if I made it big right now and I had all the money in the world, I would want to have some type of nonprofit and just kind of focus on a cause that I'm passionate about. It seems like naturally that's just kind of what people want to do. It's their way of kind of giving back, and versus just donating a ton of money to random causes here and there, actually being able to back it and really see it, and you actually be one of the people making the difference and having control over it. I think that's maybe that moment, which makes a lot of sense. I'm not yet even there in the mindset, because I'm still trying to figure out a lot of stuff with my own business and being successful and making, money to get to that point in time. But it's not a mindset or an idea that is left me in any way. I think it's definitely something that's in the future. You hope to get to that point to be able to do that.
That's awesome. Yeah, maybe we could have you. Maybe we could team up on something like that in the future too.
Definitely.
But I was going to say with this, with this Love Thy Neighbor project, and we're having kids write letters to each other. We've kind of come up with the slogan, "Every letter makes a difference," and so I feel like that's kind of tying it back full circle a little bit to my initial story of how I first used the internet to build another human connection with someone. I feel like when I say every letter makes a difference, that's kind of what it means to me. Is every letter sort of symbolizes a connection being made and across a border, and that sort of, not to like take down all these borders and burn everything down, but I think to symbolically say like we're all human at the end of the day. So yeah,
that's great. Hey man, well I really appreciate your time.
I was like, I'd love to hang out in person sometime. It's good to get to meet you this way. And
hey man, if you ever find yourself up in Toronto, or you probably will never really be in Buffalo for any reason, but there's a few places around me that I happen to be. So definitely feel free to reach out, and we'll stay, keep in touch. And I'm sure it's funny, everyone that I've talked to in this group, it's like we should go into business together in some regard, like partner up in some way with something. I think all
these have like a retreat. I'd be so down.
Yeah. Oh, that would be cool. Yeah, an automated retreat. Yeah.
Group, to some destination retreat. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, man. Definitely. Cool. Hey, well, it was great finally, talking, and it sounds like you have a lot of really cool stuff going on. So let's definitely keep in touch.
Awesome. Thank you.
Cool, man. Definitely. See ya.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Analysis Paralysis. I really hope you enjoyed it. I'm super excited to continue the podcast and to bring on more great guests. And I wanted to ask one quick thing. If those of you who are subscribed can shoot me an email at abass@aparalysis.com just to let me know why you subscribed, maybe what episodes you've enjoyed the most or what type of content you're most interested in. I would really love to gear this more and more toward those of you who are regularly listening to it. So if you could shoot me an email or just message me on Twitter, Alex H. Bass. So thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to hearing from you.